Okay, so I was kind of wrong about screen tablets because the last time I actually used one professionally was maybe about 8 years ago, and I ended up preferring regular tablets because with screen tablets, the parallax was kind of annoying. It was clunky and cumbersome, but after I spent some weeks testing the XP Pen Innovator 16, I think I've changed my mind. Let's jump in. Okay, so here we have the Innovator 16 by XP Pen. So that's the box. And here is the unboxing. Very clean presentation. The way I'm going to treat this, by the way, is that if I'm at a studio and my tablet suddenly stopped working or something, and they're like, hey, we got this new thing, just try it out and see what you think. I'm an artist, I'm just going to analyze it as such. So just as a heads up, what I normally use is this. It's a medium-sized Wacom Intuos Pro. People have asked me why I prefer to use tablets over screen tablets. It's really just personal preference. Whatever, let's just dive in. Okay, cool. So first of all, it's very thin. Wow. So it does have a protective film on it. Cool. Here's the back. Okay, so I think this is the stand, a bunch of electric converters, and I believe this is the pen. So here's where all the extra nibs are. All right, so the way you draw with it is you hold this whole thing. Just kidding. Okay, cool. Okay, it has a nice weight to it. I do know that the first nib that you use for the X Pen, because I saw in another review, it wears out because of the protective film or something on the screen. The wires, instructions, the super glove that turns you into a concept artist, microfiber cloth, very cool, good color, good color. So here's the stand. Okay, so this is the part that goes into the actual tablet, USB-C. This HDMI goes into the HDMI port of your computer. This is supposed to power the tablet, so the red one is for the power. This one is for the tablet functions itself, to be used as an actual tablet. Oh, and it also says that for the red one, you can either put it in the wall outlet or into your computer. Let's take a look at the actual tablet itself. Let's slip it out. Let's get this thing out of here. Oh, it really is thin. So, I'm right-handed, so this goes on the right. I have seen some reviews that talked about this part of the USB cord being flimsy or weak. I think it's fine. I could see why. After some time, it might cause some problems, might break off, or if you hit it. Okay, cool, it's on. Also, I'm aware that this does not require a battery or any kind of charging, which is great. I remember when I did the review for the Huon 13-inch, I had to do an uninstall of my Wacom drivers. I hope I don't have to do that here. All right, while we're here, I'm gonna show you a quick way to concept a bunch of lighting scenarios with pretty much any kind of color palette that you're using. So first things first, I'm just going to block in some color. Very basic, nothing too complicated. I am blocking it in quite loosely. For example, I'm not staying too much within the lines. That's something I can take care of later when I'm actually painting, because again, I'm not trying to make clean line art or anything like that, but rather a portrait painting. So we just have 3 basic colors, red, green, and blue. Since they're each on their own layer, what I can do now is hit Control U in Photoshop and kind of explore different colors that I might want to use. So I like the idea of ice blue, kind of silvery white hair on against the darker red skin. That'd be nice. Let's make the green a bit more velvety, because this feels a bit too lime green. Actually, warmer looks kind of cool too. Since this is just a basic portrait, I'm going to lay in a basic background. Just to grab any color that's already on here. Made a new layer underneath it all. Just gonna fill that in. I don't like it completely solid. I want some kind of gradient, and I'm probably going to have face be receiving the most light, so I want to be slightly darker behind the face so that the light hitting the face can stand out and contrast against the background. So I'm going to make the lower half of this gradient brighter. And to make it feel a little bit more natural, it's going to grab one of these brushes, which, by the way, all my brushes are in the description. It's going to paint that in. I think I want it to be a little bit warmer. What I can do here is hit Control B. It brings up color balance. I'm going to increase the red, increase the yellow. I'm going to do that again with the highlights. Increase the red and increase the yellow. Hit OK. Cool. Now it kind of blends in a little bit more nicely. So we're at a place where we could start making some lighting scenarios as concepts, but I want to introduce more varying colors, for example, in the eyes, the pupils, maybe some face paint. So at this point, I'm making sure not to be shading because I want to create the lighting with the technique that I'm about to show you. I'm only putting in local color, meaning the actual color of the materials. All right, that's good enough for the color palette for me. I'm going to go ahead and merge all those together, so now it's all on one layer. I'm going to actually merge that down. I'm going to leave it separate from the background for now. So what I want to do is actually lower the opacity of the lines so that I can see more of the color so that the lighting and the form will read really well. So here is the technique. Here's our local color. What I'm going to do is copy that. And I know some people use the multiply technique, which is fine, but I prefer this, and I'll talk about why momentarily. So once I have the second copy of the exact same layer of the local value, I'm going to hit Control L and make a darker version of everything. So I'm just going to pull this over here, grab this middle triangle thing and move it to the right. Okay, so now the most of the colors get darker, but the blue doesn't. So I'm going to actually pull this one from the right to the left under output levels. Makes that a little bit darker as well. And it could be a tricky balance, but you know. And so let me just talk about the multiply technique. So some people like to make a new layer above the local colors, the solids, and then set that layer to multiply and fill that in with like a dark blue or something. Or, you know, you can hit Control U and try a whole bunch of different other things. That works pretty great. But I feel like I have more control when I do it this way. For example, if I use this color as a multiply, that color goes into everything as magenta or whatever color I might pick. And it kind of doesn't leave room for full control. Whereas this, on the layer that I made, I can pull up hue saturation, and let's say I want to make it more colorful or a different hue family. So I can move this over, I could increase the saturation all the way, or I could decrease the saturation. So then you have like more, I guess, tools to play with. And then you can actually go into the master and hit, like, for example, let's say I want to change the shadow version of the hair to be a different hue. So right now we click cyans. I think that's, yeah. And let's say the shadow version of the hair, we want it to be more magenta or purple. And so that when we make the blue hair darker, it doesn't just go to dark blue, but it goes to darker purple. And then I could be more specific again with the reds. Maybe I want the shadows of the reds to be more maroon or a different color altogether, right? So this method just gives you a lot more freedom than the multiply layer. But again, both ways work. And I'll show you what it all means in a moment. So I'm actually going to take this second copy that we have, and I'm going to make a couple copies of it so that I can come back to it later. So here's where the masking happens, and I'm going to hold Alt. Actually, I think my camera's in the way. All right, I got that out of the way. I'm going to hold Alt and go down here to the bottom right of the layers, and then click this square with the circle in it. It almost looks like the flag of Japan. That is called a layer mask. And hold Alt, and what it does is it puts a black mask on everything. Now, if I didn't hold Alt and I press that, it puts a white mask on everything, which means if I paint with black, it'll reveal what's underneath. But I'm going to start with black and see how we can develop a lighting scenario with just that. So if I paint with white, it'll reveal the shadow layer. So I can go in here and just quickly paint in a shadow. And it has all the colors that we specified that we wanted. And it very quickly shows the idea of light. Notice how it's going straight to purple. For the hair there. And then I can pull up the airbrush actually and have more gradations kind of happening in different places. Once I have that, I can also then use the mixer brush tool, which is over here. It's the fourth one down. And use this bristle brush and start blending some of the things in the mask. Notice I'm clicked on the mask and not the layer. You have to be clicked on the mask to make sure you're working on the mask. And ideally, you would come up with a bunch of these lighting scenarios, and then you pick the one that you want to go with, and then you would flatten things and start actually blending and painting a bit more, artistically, rather than just trying to concept. So let's do another version, but this time what we'll do is not hold Alt, and instead of painting shadow, we're going to be painting light. Now this is really fun because you get to kind of do the whole game of like shining light onto things. So imagine she's standing behind a door. Let's actually flip the canvas here. And she's like looking through the crack of the door, and you could just paint that crack right there, easy, right? And it quickly just tells the story of what's going on. But let's try some other things. I want to create a sort of composition of light. So you might have heard of a 1, 2, 3 read of focal points. So what we can do is circle one spot and say, okay, well, that's definitely a focal point. That's the face. And we could say that we start here, and then we lead the eye here, and then maybe there's like a special jewel or something there, or some embroidery on the clothing that leads us back here. So we have a 1, 2, 3 cycle of focal points, because if we only have 1 or 2 focal points, we kind of bounce between them. We really want that third thing to like kind of be a anchor to create a rhythm to bring us back to being more than just bouncing between 2 focal points. So based on those areas, what I'm going to do is actually grab the airbrush tool and say, okay, let's just shine a light there. Cool. I'm not going to be too specific with shadows just yet. We're going to shine another light here. Not as big though, because I don't want the sizes of the spotlights to compete with each other. And one there. So now we're creating that triangulated rhythm. Okay. What you don't want to do is be too blown out and not have too clear of a, I guess, focal read. This is just a way to make things a little bit more interesting. I'm going to lower the opacity of the line work again, just to be a bit more about the colors rather than the lines. And so on this new layer that we made with the new mask, we can paint on it with white, I think, right? Yeah, to recast the shadows that we painted out. So what I mean by that is initially we painted those spotlights, and now we can reverse by using the other color, right? So here we're going to use, black. No, we're going to paint with white. It can be confusing if you're talking about it, but once you get the hang of it, it'll really start to make sense. So the brow ridge is going to be casting a little bit of a shadow here. And again, I'm not too concerned with rendering or blending too much, or the specifics of the eyelid and the tear ducts, all that stuff. That stuff comes later. What I want to do now is just set up the lighting so that it feels interesting. And I'm going to show something to take a little bit further in a moment. And that is going to be taking that initial layer that we made of all the color, and I want to start making highlights. So our first thing, or some people use the multiply, makes things darker. What this is going to do is make it lighter. So go back to levels. I'm going to go ahead and pull this way to make everything brighter. Now it really feels like sunlight. And so in these areas, now I can actually emphasize the light. If I use, see right there, I was painting on the layer and not the mask. Now let's paint on the mask. There we go. Right? So really taking home that idea of a spotlight. And it's really dramatic, nice high contrast, and it's really quick and easy way to make a lighting scenario. And then when let's say I'm satisfied with this, I can just take these 3 layers and merge them. Now they're all in one layer. Let's go ahead and turn that one off, right? And then I can just start painting from there. Let's take a look at the other one. Yeah, let's make a light version of that. So if I want to repeat the previous levels adjustment I did, all I have to do is press Control, Alt, and L, and it will bring back the same adjustment that I did on the previous thing. So I'm going to go ahead and do a mask on that and emphasize a spotlight up here. I think I like this one a little bit better than the second iteration that we did. Oh, yeah. And let's try actually one more. So I'm going to use the white mask. And let's actually go ahead and do just a single strip of light. Like maybe she's half in shadow. Like that door thing that we talked about. Very easy, straightforward. Let's flip the canvas, see how that looks. Yeah, kind of very D&D tavern situation. Gonna go ahead and make a copy to make a light version. Really shows that idea of sunlight. There we go. I like it. So there you go. A very quick way to concept multiple lighting scenarios by using just a couple layers and layer masks. So we have our first one. Our second one. And our third. And from here, I could just hop in and start painting and really refining things. But let's say we got to this point and we start regretting the whole purple part of the hair. Maybe we wanted it to actually go more towards blue. It's not too late because you can go to Control U, Hue Saturation. I believe it's going to be in the blues if it's purple. Yeah, okay. And we could actually make that more towards cyan if we want. But I think the purple actually works. But you can always go back to Hue Saturation, select the colors to mess with, and then just edit accordingly. And one final thing that I like to do to harmonize the colors, let's say for this one, let's say we want to emphasize the feeling of daylight, right? We can make a new layer, use a clipping mask by holding Alt between the 2 layers and then clicking, setting that layer to overlay, and grab what we think is sunlight, kind of like a warm, almost golden hour sunset. Now, if we go darker towards red, that's definitely more towards the sun is setting, right? But I want a little bit more towards golden hour. Kind of like a Lord of the Rings kind of feel. And I'll just use an airbrush on this layer. And then fill that in everywhere. And now that harmonizes and unifies all the colors by making sure all the pixels are receiving that orange glow. Once we're at 100% of the layer, I'm actually going to lower it to maybe 50 or so. Yeah. And that harmonizes it. I'm actually going to grab this same layer and do it to the other ones. Make sure I press Alt between them. And so what's useful about this is if you start off with a color palette where things might not feel like they're kind of working together very well, this is one way to harmonize it. One last thing I can add for concepting light within this process is you can start introducing rim light. Actually, one thing I regret is not painting the shadow parts of what would happen in lighting there, but that's fine. I could do that in actual painting. Anyway, rim light. So in the shadow part, we can just grab some whites, and on the forms of the face or the hair or wherever that are facing away from us towards the back, we can put an indication of rim light. And it's a very, very effective way to show form without having to do too much rendering or painting. What I like to do is put too much and then erase out in areas to make it less aggressive in terms of light or contrast that gets our attention or takes away attention from the main show, which is definitely the eye, receiving that light. I also want to mention that if you want to test to see if the lighting is working and it feels like it reads well as a lighting concept or scenario, turn off the line work and see if it still holds up, and that's, something that just happens to read really well in this case because we had the light, we have the darks, lights, midtones, and it's casting shadows and it's showing the form across the materials. Let's see how that works with these. This one's not as strong because we didn't have the shadows painted in just yet. But I'm sure we can get there pretty easily. So overall, I think I've actually switched over and I'm using this way more often than I expected. I haven't even plugged in my regular tablet since I got this one. Let's talk about the pros and cons. Pros? Well, it's very thin and light. You can unplug it, move it aside, take it with you. The glass on the parallax is pretty thin, and you get used to the coordination pretty quickly. I didn't have to uninstall my Wacom drivers for this to work like I had to do with the Huon tablet. It's compatible with most drawing programs, and then one of the most important parts is that it doesn't overheat. These were my main first impressions with this Innovator 16 by XP pen. One thing I forgot to mention is that the tilt function is what I'm usually looking for when I'm trying out a new tablet. Can I rotate the pen and have the brush in the program actually rotate along with it? This allows you to do that. That's a huge plus for me. I often get asked how I do that in my videos. It's basically my brush settings are set to pen tilt here in the settings, and all I have to do is angle the actual pen and it will rotate whichever angle I'm angling the pen at. The pen tilt is not as sensitive as the Wacom, but it does the job just how I need it. Now the cons. So I did have to recalibrate it a few times to make sure the cursor is lined up. That's not really a con, it's just kind of nitpicking. One con for me is that the button on the pen you can customize, but you can't set it to double click. You can set it to right click, you can set it to Alt or Control and stuff, I think. But you can't set it to double click, which is the default for Wacom, so it's kind of something I had to get used to. Hopefully they change this. I don't actually use the buttons and the quick keys on tablets or screen tablets. It would be great if you can set the wheel thing here on the left to actually rotate the canvas. I couldn't find a way to do that. Another con is that you have to have Windows Ink enabled. I tried to make this work without Windows Ink, and the reason I don't like Windows Ink is because it sometimes messes with pressure sensitivity and does this kind of weird pressure jump when I'm trying to draw lightly. It'll go full opacity out of nowhere. While there is only one USB-C cable coming out of the tablet, it does split into 3 wires or connections. 2 USBs, one for the tablet, one for the power, and an HDMI. It would be really great if it all just functions with one cable. Hopefully that's something we can see later down the line. And the other con is that the stand it comes with does have a pretty low angle. It requires a little bit of a hunch over it. You can kind of fix this by putting a couple books underneath the stand. Ideally, you could get an arm that will kind of move to any angle that you need and hold it in place and allowing you to draw however you like. Great. And I should be clear about the fact that I haven't tried too many other screen tablets because I usually say no to these kinds of review offers. So it's hard for me to compare with current technology from Wacom or whatever, but so far this has been great for me. I may take a look at bigger screens. I think the screen size for this is pretty fine. You know, unfortunately with the Huon tablet that I reviewed prior, I think maybe a year ago actually, the screen was just too small. I like to have enough screen space to see the painting I'm working on and have a bit of peripheral for either reference or whatever. All right, hope that was helpful, and feel free to ask any questions in the comments. Let me know what you think about screen tablets versus tablets and what you use and what your preferences are. I'm actually curious to see what most people are using these days. Be sure you're subscribed, hit the like button, the bell icon, and I'll see you next time. Bye.